The United States is the only country in the world that allows minors to be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Alternatives to incarceration save taxpayer money, reduce recidivism, and keep families and communities intact. On this episode of Race Talk Revolution with Lane and Eugene, our guests are Mr. Patrick Schelle, Director of Alternatives to Incarceration Coalition 914, and Ms. Ayanna Armstrong, author of A New Hope for Justice. This episode originally aired November 3rd, 2021.
Welcome to another Race Talk Revolution episode with Lane and Eugene. Race Talk Revolution is a place where your voice matters. We want to thank you for joining today. And today our topic is alternatives to incarceration. And our speakers today are Mr. Patrick Schelle of Alternatives to Incarceration Coalition and Ms. Ayanna Armstrong, author of the book, A New Hope for Justice. Now, as always, during our conversation today, we ask that you please remain muted. Now, as you know, when we get to the Q&A section, we will instruct you on how to raise your hand. You know, we also want to remind everybody, and I want to say welcome to the new people here to Race Talk Revolution. Race Talk Revolution is a loving, inclusive platform designed to strip away the false beliefs that keep us separated as a species, uncover the not-so-hidden truth that we all want the same things in life, and to heal the wounds created by systemic racism. Race Talk Revolution is a safe and brave space for people of all backgrounds to share ideas and opinions and explore the nuances of systemic racism while together growing our capacity for effective anti-racist activism. The Race Talk Revolution community is committed to practicing radically inclusive love. Now, what that really means is that when we do not understand or agree with what's being shared, we are still committed to listening with respect, listening with appreciation, and listening with empathy. It is our commitment that every person be encouraged, heard, and appreciated, because here on Race Talk Revolution with Lane and Eugene, every voice matters. My co-host, Reverend Lane Cobb.
So thank you, Eugene, and welcome everyone. So happy to see you. Welcome to our first time guest this afternoon, and so happy to introduce our speakers. Patrick Schelle is a seasoned social worker and lead coordinator for the Alternatives to Incarceration Coalition 914. Working over 10 years in Westchester County, New York, Mr. Schelle is determined to address racial disparities and utilize a trauma-responsive lens to transform the youth justice system. In addition to advocacy work in the U.S. and in Haiti, primary job functions include adaptive leadership and program development in the nonprofit sector. Patrick has been recognized by the National Association of Social Workers for his commitment to social justice. Ms. Ayanna Armstrong is a 22-year-old native of Mount Vernon, New York, and the recipient of the 2020 Young Achiever Award in that community's third annual Women's Worth Awards. She is a recent graduate of the University of Buffalo, where she earned a bachelor's degree in political science. The author of the book, A New Hope for Justice, Ayanna's primary goal is to educate as many people as she can about the criminal justice system, be a voice for Black lives, and a positive influence on everyone she meets. Her book provides an innovative approach for ordinary citizens to make an impact in the area of criminal justice reform. Welcome to both of you. We're so happy to have you here today.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Our pleasure. Patrick, we'd like to start with you, if that's okay. Would you please share about your organization, Alternatives to Incarceration Coalition 914? What are your goals of your program, and tell us what that's about?
Sure thing. So it's great to be here today, and I'm really happy to be here with my friend and co-conspirator, Ayanna, in this work for Alternatives to Incarceration. So really our coalition, we are not trying to build another program or put another technical solution in application to fix a problem that is based and rooted in systemic racism. here in our country. So we're really trying to work and build a coalition, which is, a group of people, organizations, and dedicated, focused, passionate advocates to fight for change and transformation that's needed to our incarceration system, specifically here in New York State, specifically here in Westchester County. And our specific focus right now is addressing the youth justice system and the incarceration of young people.
How did you get involved in this work?
That's a good question. So, as a young person, I definitely went through my challenges. I had some ups and downs. I definitely had problematic behaviors as a young person, and even into emerging adulthood, I had contacts with the criminal justice system. So, I do understand that my journey and, my path was different based on my race, and taking that into consideration and finding my path into helping others through social work has really shaped, my passion around this specific topic. Additionally, working in the youth mental health field of social work for about over a decade now has really shone the light on the misdiagnosis of problematic behavior, right? Where a young person may be having challenges, whether it's a mental health challenge, trauma, other things that might be going on with their family unit, a lot of times can be misdiagnosed as, they're truant or they're a criminal, right? Criminalizing them from a very young age. So those are two things that really have shaped my passion and interest on this specific topic.
Thank you. Yes. Wow. That's a lot of truth, what you just said. Ayanna, how have you become involved? Why have you become involved, and why did you write your book?
The first time that I was aware about the criminal justice system was when I was in 7th grade. And I remember sitting in class waiting to hear the verdict of the Trayvon Martin case. And like my friends and everyone in that class planned to come with our hoodies and like a bottle of Arizona and Skittles to like show our solidarity. And I remember like hearing the verdict come back not guilty and just wondering, like, I just don't understand why 17-year-old Trayvon Martin, who looked like me, got murdered because he was just stereotyped by someone that just happened to be walking around in the street, and the killer, George Zimmerman, was set free. And I didn't know it yet, but I feel like that is what set me on the path to where I am today. I ended up going to college, studying criminal justice courses and doing political science, and then writing a book about criminal justice reform. And I feel like that's what made me very passionate. And I also wrote the book because I felt hopeless watching the news every day. And also now that social media is becoming more prevalent and highlighting the issues within the criminal justice system and just Black people getting mistreated by the police. So I feel like personally, I thought that I couldn't make a difference, but I found out with more research and through my book that that's not the case. And that, we'll talk about more of that for the Q&A.
Eugene, you're muted.
There we go. Patrick, I have a question for you. What are some examples of alternative programming? And then also, who is or should be eligible for those alternatives?
Really good question, Eugene. So in Westchester County, we have a couple examples of alternatives to incarceration. In Mount Vernon specifically, we have the Youth Shelter of Westchester. That is actually targeted towards the emerging adult range. So that can be 16 and older, someone that has maybe had a criminal justice system and previous involvement, maybe as a young person as well. And what that is a community-based setting where you really wrap around the young person with a lot of love and support. You focus on things like independent living skills, job readiness, connecting the young person to a proper living situation, if maybe they're coming from more of a homeless state. And then really continuum of care after graduation from the program. So when you graduate from the program, there's continuous check-ins, follow-ups, maintaining of communication that it's not just another program where you're involved for 3 months, 6 months, a year, graduate, and then you become another statistic in regards to recidivism. It's more so we're going to stay connected with you. We're going to make sure you're doing well with keeping your apartment in order, keeping your job lined up, and all those really important things to stay independent and stay, safe in the community. And that's one of the key components of the youth shelter, is that follow-up piece. And then some other things that we do have right now: restorative justice is still a growing and developing aspect of criminal justice systems here in Westchester County, but we do have some community-based justice programs through Family Services of Westchester and other local nonprofits, and they are providing services like the Credible Messenger program, working with young people on contact with the justice system to try to come up with those alternatives in the community. Again, at times even providing a stipend for a young person to participate in safe and productive programming after school and things of that sort. So the Credible Messengers is another very, very great option as an alternative.
Sweet. So this is a question I have for both of you. So what are the specific implications for Black and Indigenous and people of color, the BIPOC and the BPOC population? Well, everybody in that population.
Okay, so I'll lead off on that, and then I'm going to pass it to Ayanna. So I'm going to start with, when we talked about this, you can really break down implications into positive and negative, right? So that's exactly what we're going to do. I'm going to speak a little bit on the negative implications. So, as we know, unfortunately, the US is 5% of the world population, yet we are 25% of the world's prisoners. We have 2.3 million prisoners, and right now we're the highest rate of incarceration in the world. So with those statistics, we kind of realize that the negative implications are already in place. This can continue to perpetuate. We can continue to criminalize young people. And when it starts from that young age, then it just becomes the continuum. There's multi-systemic, there's intergenerational racial trauma that will just continue on and on. So a lot of us do know from our studies and working on our anti-racist principles that this is the implication. This is what we are trying to stop. So the positive implications, that's what I'm going to pass to Ayanna to speak a bit on that.
I had a couple examples. So I wanted to talk about firsthand volunteering at the Children's Village and at the youth shelter. So when I was at Pace University, I had a course credit for juvenile delinquency. So for part of the class, we had to go over to the Children's Village in Dobbsbury, where we worked with the youth. We gave them, we went over worksheets, reading, and we got to know them. And I feel like we built a bond with them. And towards the end, they ended up coming to Pace University to hang out with us for the day. And the youth ended up sharing with us how much it meant to us, how much it meant to them, and that they wish that they could keep in contact, but they can't because of the policies. But I feel like that is a good example of an alternative to incarceration. It's giving the youth a second chance. And seeing the youth shelter in Mount Vernon and talking to the youth too, I feel like I inspired them. Me and Patrick inspired them when we went a couple weeks ago. And it's just nice to see that the work that we're doing is actually coming together and we get to see it in real life. So I feel like those are two positive implications.
Great. That's great. And this is a great question that Ann Watts has, which is a great follow-up question to what you guys just said. How widespread is this type of programming in this country? If you have any information on that.
That's a really good question. Alternatives to incarceration for young people really was a rollout after Raise the Age, which was a national legislation to raise the age of incarceration to 18. So with that process across a national level, there was a lot of effort. Every state is at a different point in time. The last two states to pass Raise the Age were New York and North Carolina. So as you can imagine, we're pretty far behind in rolling this out. We have states like California and Los Angeles County that are very far ahead. They actually implemented a Department of Health jurisdiction of diversion programming and alternatives to incarceration for young people. You have states like New Hampshire that have completely depleted their detention centers and incarceration settings for young people and come up with strong community-based alternatives. So, and then New York, we're very much so far behind. We are still working on some of these, implementing these alternatives and really putting a halt to expanding detention, expanding incarceration models here in not only the county, but in the state as well.
Yeah, thank you. One of the obvious implications is that it keeps families and communities of color intact, right? So how significant is that effort in your work, the work that you guys are doing?
So it's definitely significant. In my background with mental health and trauma, there's a few key things when you're addressing any type of trauma. One of the things is connectedness. So if you can stay connected to your family and your community, that is one of the most important things. Right now, we have models set up where our young people from Westchester County can be sent to Long Island, can be sent upstate New York, to all these different settings where you're further disconnecting from your primary support system. So it's further creating trauma, further, distancing you from your loved ones, and that has very serious implications, like you mentioned.
So if I may, so our alternatives to incarceration are all of them focused on local, right, keeping people local, or not so much? Because I know there's different kinds. You said restorative justice. There's drug court is considered an alternative to incarceration program, right? Anything that people are going into some treatment or some kind of alternative housing, for example. I'd be interested in hearing about some of those examples. Are they all focused on keeping people local?
They should be. Majority, a lot are. And I think the transformation is to start thinking this way. Now, are they all truly local? No. Even in the mental health setting, there could be group homes or other community-based residential settings that are located outside of the county from which the young person lives. But as you can imagine, even too, Westchester County is pretty large. So if you do live in New Rochelle or Mount Vernon, and you have to go up to Valhalla or different locations throughout the county, that is still a quite disconnected amount of travel and time and space needed to reach your loved one. So we are trying to prioritize that as one of the key components to alternatives, but right now it's definitely not prioritized by the state and local municipalities.
So my question then is, one of the questions is people kind of sometimes feel like, okay, this is that people should be punished, right? This is one of those things where you have people that will sometimes stand on one side or the other, as many of our political, subjects are. And so what do you say to people who feel like, no, these shouldn't exist, right? Who pays for these programs? How are these funded? Are people looking at the fact that do they know that these save taxpayer money? What are the arguments that you hear for people who are saying these programs shouldn't exist?
Okay, yeah, that's Ayanna. You want to touch base on this one?
Yeah, touch a little base on it. I said for me, I feel like as human beings, we all deserve a second chance, especially the youth. Like growing up, specifically for me, I know I've always heard this generation is the future, the kids are the future, but if we're abandoning the youth when they make like a little mistake because of like their environment that they grew up in, they can't really control their mental health, they're not given the proper resources to succeed, what kind of message are we sending to the youth? And the criminal justice system was designed for basically like an eye for an eye, a nose for a nose, basically stuff like that. And that's like an old school way of thinking. And Patrick can touch on like restorative justice and more stuff like that. But that's my opinion on that.
Yes, and what we like to say and refer to as to the naysayers, one of our members likes to refer to that group. So, you know, when you look at the incarceration model, right, and how much it costs to incarcerate either a young person or an adult, per dollar, what we would save by utilizing these community-based alternatives is so drastic. If we could show this, you know, the positive outcomes and the percentage of reduced recidivism rates by using these services, we can show our county executive, we can show our state governor, you know, how much money we can truly save by utilizing these alternatives. It's a very, very drastic difference when it comes to the amount of money we spend on incarceration yearly.
Yeah. There's a chat, Patrick, that I know that you got. It was from Joe. So I just want to go ahead and ask this, you know, out into the room, put it out into the room. What role, if any, do faith communities have in your work? And do you rely on faith communities to assist or otherwise participate in this alternative to incarceration work? Thank you, Joe.
That's a really good question. I don't know, do you want to touch base on it briefly and then I could finish up on it?
Faith communities?
Faith with an F.
No, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not. I think Patrick could take that first.
Okay, I could tackle that one first. So definitely what we are trying to do in engaging with the faith-based communities is really a call to action, right? So this doesn't necessarily mean putting Christianity or whatever the religion may be on young people or on folks, but more of a call to action in a sense of community, right? If you are a church and you are centered in downtown Mount Vernon and you have a community room, you have space available to welcome in young people. We all know that Mount Vernon right now is going through so many challenges when it comes to violence in the community. Sometimes a young person just needs a safe place to be. So our call to action for the faith-based community in Westchester right now is, how are you available to provide support to alternatives to incarceration and implementing restorative justice practices, even if it is just lending the community center 2 nights a week for us to meet there and meet with young people and provide that safe space. So right now, you know, there are clergy members and faith-based community leaders that are involved in this work. They get involved with police reform coalitions and committees. They get involved with the youth shelter of Westchester. All that is great, but it's a next step level 2 that we need. We need all, you know, faith-based community to join in and be of assistance in any way possible, even if that is volunteering to be a mentor or volunteering to go speak at one of the youth groups. Any way possible is what we're looking for engagement with the community.
You know, Sandy put a really good question in the chat, which, you know, we kind of do want to talk about, because we were asking about specific implications of alternatives to incarceration programs for the BIPOC community. And what we're really talking about is, you know, disrupting the school to prison pipeline, actually, right? There's, instead of that automatic arrest incarceration thing that happens, you know, how do we effectively get kids away from that? How do we show that the alternatives to incarceration programs reduce recidivism, keep you know, families together, the effects of that? And then Sandy is asking, you know, where do all the white kids go, right? So are we now, is this a different path, right? And we kind of know it is, but I'd like you to speak to that a little bit. Like, what happens to white kids when they do something wrong as opposed to kids of color?
Surely.
And we can also speak to kids of color being tried as adults, right? We can definitely talk about that, if you would, please.
Sure thing. I'm going to take a moment now, Lane, to share the data report. So to speak on the racial disparities So here we have the State of Westchester 2020 Black Children and Youth Report, comprised by Westchester Children's Association and some of our other community partners. It's really important to look at this statistic here, that 14%, Black children are 14% of Westchester's children, and they are 62% of juvenile detention in Westchester County. So there you can see the vast racial disparity. So there's no question in the fact that young white people are not going to juvenile detention or incarceration settings at the vast rate that our young Black and brown children are going to these settings. That's, you know, this report is really a great report. You can access this via the Westchester Children's Association link and website, but this is the evidence, right? And when we're trying to advocate for change to systems, legislators and local officials will ask, what's the data on a local level? We have the data. And the truth is that when a young white person gets in trouble, they may have a different experience because a lot of things going on in their personal life. They may have a mom or a father that will come and pick them up from school, or the response is very different in their living experience because their skin is white. So there's a lot of difference. In other communities, it's quick to criminalize a young person based on the color of their skin. And, you know, this is the change that we're trying to make and point out that this is not happening in other settings. And, you know, other young people might not even get suspended from school. So we know in talking about the school to prison pipeline that that young Black boys and girls get suspended at a much higher rate. All those statistics on the report are very evident of the racial disparities, and these are transparent across the nation. This is a report specific to Westchester County, but the data matches up and aligns with a lot of other counties and areas throughout the country.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if this data is available, and how do our folks who are not living in Westchester, New York, find this kind of data? What are they Googling?
So I could definitely, I'll drop it in the chat as well. But it's Westchester Children's Association. If you go to their
right, but I'm asking for what are we Googling if we live in California, right? If we live in Colorado, what are we looking up?
Okay,
if we want to find our local data.
Yeah, so California, like I mentioned, some jurisdictions do have a department connected to your local Department of Health or Department of Community Mental Health. So you could definitely start, if you just Google youth incarceration and then your county, you can find some data, but it just depends on how transparent your county is or your municipality. Right now in Westchester County, we have New Schelle is one of the first cities to actually start putting out data and breakdown by race when it comes to interactions with the police. So these are things that are still new. So you might not be able to find the data because people don't want you to find the data. So this is why it's one of the most important things. We want to show light to the true reality of the racism that's happening within all the systems that impact young people. But the reality is you will have a hard time finding the data. So you're gonna have to dig hard, you're gonna have to reach people. You might reach out to a local nonprofit that may be the person that is overseeing the youth detention center in your community, and they might not want to share the data with you, or they might want to. They might be able to do that with you. So it depends.
Thank you. Yeah, I heard you talk about, that white kids might have a mom or someone, a caregiver coming to pick them up from school. And I want to make sure we're not throwing, BIPOC parents under the bus, right? It's not that we're not, there for our kids, necessarily, but we're not empowered by the system, right? Maybe we're not even called. Maybe our kid goes, gets arrested and sent someplace without our even being called. We're called after they get to the detention center, right? So these are things that we need to highlight about how different the treatment is, right? For our kids of color. Jenny asked, can we get data from our own local municipalities for how many youth are arrested by age and race? It's not always disaggregated, is it, Patrick?
No, it's not. It's definitely not. And like I mentioned, it's something that is new to a lot of counties and municipalities, even on a local level, of getting data down by race.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Ayanna, you feel free to jump in if you have something to add, right? Because we want to empower our volunteers also on this call, just to, let people know that there is something that they can do. I know that you're a big volunteer and an advocate. You wrote this book to help people understand how they can make an impact. And so if you have something, some specific suggestions you'd like to make, we'd like to hear those.
Okay. Well, for the school to prison pipeline, I would say I noticed that there was like a little difference with the education system, because I was on like the Mount Vernon track team. So we got to travel to like Scarsdale, Schelle. And like I noticed that, they had a lot more after school programs. They had like singing programs, going to the pool, like they had like a swimming team and stuff like that. And I just didn't understand why Mount Vernon didn't have that. And I feel like if we're given the proper resources, or like the students are given the proper resources in order to succeed, then Mount Vernon can build up the community the way that I see the vision for Mount Vernon myself, which is why I'm like very big on giving back and doing advocacy work.
Understood. Yes, thank you.
Ayanna, I wanted to ask a question. Why is it important to amplify the youth voice in this movement, being that you are one of those voices?
Yeah, good question. I feel like even the youth too, but in general, I feel like everyone came onto this planet, and we all have our own role to play. We should want to inspire others, network, learn new things, and teach it to those who want to learn. And I also feel like, like I said, that we've always been taught that we're the future and we need to make a change. So I feel like we just need to push. Someone needs to inspire other youth, and I feel like it might be me, to that it's okay to speak out and we can make a change. We don't have to be a certain age in order to make a change.
This is true. This is true. Yeah, Lane, I actually do. Even though we're not quite there, but I'm going to go ahead and ask Adine to unmute and go ahead and ask your question, Adine.
I think I put it in the chat. I was just saying that the interaction frequently with white kids and the police is diametrically different from the interaction with Black kids and police. I recall a number of years ago in an affluent white community on Long Island, 2 white boys who entertained themselves one summer night by slitting the tops of convertibles. And when the police arrived, so did one of the fathers, who was a lawyer. Well, that was the end of that. And that happens all the time. The police know who they're supposed to hassle and arrest, and they also know whom they're supposed to leave alone. This is systemic. This is all planned. This is it's the way the country wants to be.
No argument.
Yeah,
I don't think either one of our speakers would argue with that.
I definitely agree. I agree.
And it's like pushing a boulder up a mountain, but we have to do it, right? Because the youth are being systematically extracted, right? And it's, yeah. So these programs do work. Patrick, I think, Eugene, is it okay for us to just open the Q&A? Do you want to tell people, seem to know how to raise their hands, but do you want to tell people how to do it?
Right. That's where I was just going now. Yes. So let's go ahead and open up the Q&A. And just real fast, and to raise your hand, take your cursor down to the right-hand side of your lower right-hand side of your screen, click on reactions, and in there you'll see the raise hand button. If it's not available for you there, try going to participants. That window will open up on your right-hand side. Go down and find your name, and then click on the three dots to the right-hand side, and you shall find that that you can be able to raise your hand from there. All righty. So we have in order, we have Cody, we have James, and then we have Ann.
Yeah, hi. I facilitate workshops in prison called Alternatives to Violence, and they were actually started after the Attica riots by prisoners who wanted to keep young people out of prison. So it's all kind of part of a deal here. What I find is that sometimes the well-meaning volunteer people in prison are prone to the same issues that we've talked about many times here about kind of not seeing it quite clearly. And the idea of alternatives to violence is often to get a group that is really a mixed group, mixed race, mixed age, mixed everything, so that they can interact and find their humanity, common humanity. And the current one that I have now, the program manager person for volunteers, doesn't want to put down the race. And I think she sees in putting down the race of the inmate that it's pejorative somehow, that it's pointing fingers, and rather than the fact that we're trying to get a nice mix of groups. It's, by the way, the prison where I am, by the way, used to be called the White House. So that's partly an answer to the question about where do the white kids go. It used to be very, very white. And then they moved a lot of kids who don't live in the area because it's a white area in California. It's mostly European descendant people. But they've moved people from Southern California and all over, so that it's now no longer that anymore, because not just the local population. Anyway, those are just two thoughts. There wasn't a real question, but it was just interesting, the overlap of what we've talked about before. No, I don't see race kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting, right? I don't see race. And I remember hearing the first time a Black woman's response to that, if you don't see race, well, then you're not seeing me. Right? Yeah. Cody, thank you for so much. Mr. James Barnwell, if you go ahead and unmute yourself. Thank you. And welcome to Race Talk Revolution.
Hello, everyone. Like the brother Cody, I have a story. One of the stories that was told about the father coming, that was the lawyer. I was in a situation when I was around 18, and I got 8 years in prison for a crime for armed robbery, and an assault. 3 white kids came in with the same charge. They stabbed a delivery guy and they robbed him, and they got 5 years probation. And I took that program AVP that Mrs. Cody was talking about. It's not that it doesn't work. The problem is you're still in a situation where violence is prone and you look to defend yourself. And when you come out here into the free world, it's like either you have to stay clear of anybody and everybody you know, which is a hard thing to do, especially when you're still living in that same environment. You still living, for the most part, that fight or flight lifestyle and just trying to make it to where you gotta go. I don't know, but I work with kids. I work for Children's Village. I'm a family advocate, and I've been home for like 16 years, but it haven't been easy. And most of the people that was working the program of AVP, they're home now, and I'm a credible messenger also. Thanks, Carl Johnson. He's on the call. But people have given me opportunities And some people don't get opportunities. Like Mona Swanson, Daphne, that's on the call. They gave me an opportunity. A lot of people don't get opportunities.
Mhm.
And without those opportunities that people get, leads them down a road of a perpetual cycle. That's all I have to say. But thank you for this. It's been super, super, super dope. And Ayanna, and I forgot the other gentleman's name.
Patrick.
Thank you.
Patrick.
Is thank you for this.
Thank you for
Oh,
being here.
I wanted to say that with the program that you were talking about, or just like programs in general, one powerful quote that I've seen is that even though you're going through all the trainings and stuff like that, it just varies by skin color. So it might not work for you because of, that we're Black, but it might work for other people, like white people and stuff like that. So I remember that quote that you said that. So I feel like it correlates with what you said.
And thank you, Cody and James, for reminding us about AVP and the fact that alternatives to incarceration don't start in the community. It actually starts when people are still incarcerated. So that's a big part of the puzzle. And in New York State, we do have things like AVP, and we also do have education systems set up, but we need more of that. The amount of prisoners that an educational even reach in New York State is a small percentage. We need more and more programs like AVP and our Bard College initiative.
Lane, thank you for putting that in there. AVP, Alternatives to Violence Project. For those who may not be keeping track of the chat. We have Anne, and then Joe, and then Tyrone, and then Sandy.
Thank you so much for this program, and James Barnwell for sharing your experience. I recently had the privilege of hearing from 4 formerly incarcerated young men who had graduated from the Bard College in Prison initiative and are now succeeding in life. So there's that piece of it, that there needs to be much more opportunity for education and then follow-up support when people get out of prison. I'm also working to be trained as a circle leader and yesterday I had the privilege of assisting at a training for teachers in the Peekskill school system, and the emphasis was on the importance of people building relationships. And Patrick, you mentioned the need for connectedness, feeling connected, and there's a whole culture shift that's needed. And I'm hoping that introducing restorative practices into the schools, and I'm also hoping to work in the community to do that, is so important to the future.
Thank you, Anne. I'm just going to say for folks that circle leadership is a restorative justice practice, right? Okay, very good. And people may want to actually look up after this restorative justice. We have restorative justice training opportunities. If you Google it, you will find there are organizations that are offering that in your area online. The restorative justice practices are a very good way to enter into justice reform work. So if you are interested in finding out, if you don't know what skills are useful, you don't know, I would recommend Googling restorative justice training, and you will find some opportunities. Thanks for letting me jump in there. Thank you, Anne, for sharing your experience, and congratulations.
All righty, we have Brother Joe, and then Tyrone, Sandy, and then Whitefire.
thank you, Ayanna and Patrick, for bringing your experiences to this forum. But we all really appreciate it, and we thank you so much for doing that. And Patrick, it's good to see you again. My question is this: this race talks frequently. Sometimes we wind up with folks are inspired, and they ask, "What can I do? What can I do to further anti-racism work?" And can I ask for you to maybe describe if we were inspired to participate in your organization and join you and do some of the work, can you help describe what it would look like for a newcomer to come into your organization, and what would they be asked to do with zero experience with this kind of work? What would that look like? What would they be asked to do? What would they be expected to do?
That's always a really, really good question. And I can't stress it enough that it comes with education and practice. You definitely need to start with taking either an Undoing Racism workshop as a base level intro to this work. If you're coming to this, you need to read, you need to attend, book discussions. That's we talk about this a lot. When the world was going through what we were going through in 2020, and people were actually stepping up and trying to learn more, a lot of people started book clubs or book discussion groups. But for white folks, that is what you need to do. You need to start with educating yourself. You need to talk to the younger people that are in your family. You need to talk to the older people that are in your family. It's a process. It's an ongoing learning process. You need to be ready to learn. You need to be ready to be uncomfortable. You need to be ready to take risks in your learning process, and you need to be ready to grow. So if you go into it with that attitude and that mindset, you can make a lot of strides, but you have to go into it with a very specific mindset and willingness to learn and grow.
Ayanna, did you want to add to that or no?
Specifically with ADDIC, when I first joined, Patrick was pretty welcoming. He gave me like the rundown of the coalition, what they stand for. And I feel like if you have any questions or you want to do little side projects like doing research, Patrick and Matthew are always willing to help you out and like do side projects like that to learn more about racism and the work that we do as well.
And I think it is important. Thanks. I just want to jump in to remind people, thank you, Patrick, and thank you, Joe, for the question, that we sometimes will go into this work, right, and then we'll get our feelings hurt, right? Because we'll feel like, oh, we're not being utilized enough, or, oh, they said I needed to do this first or whatever, or we'll be activated by something that we won't even know we're activated about, right? Anti-racism work and being in these uncomfortable situations. Don't shy away. Don't, just do, just be available and do what you're being told to do, basically, but, by the organizational leadership, and trust that you're there and that your presence will make a difference with that attitude of, I'm here, I don't know everything, right? I don't know everything, but I'm here to make a difference. Yeah. Yeah. I love it.
And that speaks to the practice. Patrick said education and practice. Right. And it's that practice part. It's that being, yes, it's great to learn what's going on and how to do it, but then we need to take what we've learned and then put that into action. Yeah. Thank you, Lane. We have Tyrone and Sandy and then Whitefire.
Brother Patrick, James, and Sister Ayanna, thank you guys so much for being on this call. You guys know there's a lot of crazy stuff that's going on right now. I think OAC called it the hokey pokey. You put one foot in, you put one foot out. It just seems like that's going on in terms of the push and pull with not only criminal justice, but just looking at the facts of history, right? And now it's being demonized and called CRT and all that stuff. But my question is really for you, Ayanna. You are very impressive as a young person. And I want to know, what is your opinion of the generation that's on this call right now? I mean, many people here have, I'm willing to bet, at least it's true for me in the late 60s and 70s, I'm running around with a sign and talking a bunch of stuff and you know, being bold and all that stuff. That's changed over the years. I kind of turn it over to your generation. But I'm really curious to see what your thoughts are about what we left for you guys and just your take in general on how, you know, not only how we can be better, but from your perspective, what do you think the generation, that's the generation between the civil rights movement, right, and the current window of time, what's your take on that?
That's a really good question. I feel like I just been reading like a lot of books about like Malcolm X, Frederick Douglass, and Barack Obama, and I feel like, especially, I think I was in like third grade when Barack Obama got elected for president, and I feel like that's like what really I got his whole poster on my wall, his whole family, and I feel like that's what really inspired me to realize that, you know, that we can do it. And I feel like with the history books, like America, they just made it seem like especially for Black History Month, we only just learn about the same things every year. I feel like we need to learn about real rich Black history. Our Black students need to be educated and just know that slavery isn't the only thing that we've been through. Like we've done like a whole bunch of stuff. I've learned about on my own research, like the different inventions that Black people have contributed to society that no one talks about. And I feel like the generation after me has done a lot of work, but there's still more work to be done. And I'm just looking forward to see it all come to place.
I appreciate that. I just want to add one thing is that you're right about Black studies. You know, the Black studies should actually be white studies. I mean, you really want to break it down, you know, instead of saying, you know, we just have to focus on our thing. We need to look at it beyond that. So I'll leave that alone. But thank you for the question. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Sandy.
Yeah, I just want to thank Eugene and Lane for this program, and of course, Ayanna and Patrick. So important. If we don't restore humanity for our young people, what does that say about us, right? But the point that Patrick made about formal education, you know, I just can't stress that enough, because if I didn't have the Undoing Racism workshop, if we all didn't have the Undoing Racism workshop to give us that common understanding, that common definition, we would just continuously be disorganizing. And Joyce James, you know, who does the groundwater workshop, she says, we're going to call a moratorium on fixing broken people and programs, and we're going to turn the mirror inward and fix the systems, you know? So I'm just saying that I want to say what Patrick said, that we have to turn the mirror inward, and we have to look at how racism has dehumanized us and has dehumanized the judge, and the way the judge sees it, and the SROs see it, and the teachers see it, the police see it. What they see has been dehumanized and distorted. And so the systems look the way they do. When you go to Woodfield Cottage, they were all Black kids. And it was like, this is a cottage? No. You know, this was like, you know, where are the white kids? So the gatekeepers who put those children there also have to look at their lens. And so we keep wanting to go into can we give more services, more services? These kids are getting the services. What they need is for the judge's lens to change, for the teacher's lens to change, the SRO's lens to change, the police lens to change, for all us white people's lens to change. So when we see a kid being a kid, we don't see a criminal. And so I just want to just lift what Patrick and Ayanna are saying. We need formal, common, consistent education. And it begins for us, you know, with the Undoing Racism workshop, getting to the root, and the groundwater. Because, you know, once again, if we have popcorn education, none of us know what the other one knows. You know, we all think we're talking about anti-racism. Somebody's talking about implicit bias. Somebody's talking, you know, it just gets crazy. So in Westchester, we've had thousands and thousands of people who've gone through the Undoing Racism workshop. And I'd like to believe that it has generated some of the clarity that we see and has enabled us to work cross systems for the restoration of humanity. So thank you for this program, and thank you for everybody who's here. Each time we come and see almost the same people, it's kind of like this is our formal education at some level.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's good. It's good
Thank
stuff.
you. And so I just want, for people who don't know what Woodfield Cottage is, Patrick, just clarify, please, what's Woodfield Cottage? What is Sandy referring to, please?
Woodfield Cottage is our primary detention center in Westchester County. So it's under the services are provided through the Children's Village, which is a leader in nonprofit social welfare services in Westchester County in New York City. However, it's a detention and incarceration model. So that is where our young people are incarcerated. And one of our main goals is to really make sure that we do not expand incarceration models like the Woodfield Cottage here in Westchester County.
Thank you. Who's next, Eugene?
Okay, we have Whitefire.
Yes, thank you so much, Patrick and Ayanna. And thank you, Eugene and Lane, for bringing this. I just want to say, I struggled when you said that this is the way our country wants to be, or something like that. I struggled with that statement. And so part of me wants to ask more on that from you, and the other part has a lot to say. So, so I'm struggling not to say right now and to ask instead, because I do want to say afterwards. So if somebody can tell me about that, because what I see, I'm just going to say what I see is that the bulk of our country does not want our country to be this way. The bulk of our country does not want that. However, as Patrick was saying, we don't have the understanding, we don't have the learning, we have not been taught white, history, as we were, talking about. We've not been taught. And so what I see is people aren't active, people aren't taking action because they have no idea that that is what they need to do. They're not making the connection that says, yes, I know this is wrong. Yes, it doesn't feel right to me. And I have to learn something first, and then I might feel empowered to take action, or I can feel empowered to take action. So that's the kind of framework that I'm seeing. Can people talk to that, please? Thank you.
Well, I just want to say quickly that the criminal justice system is it's not broken. It's just designed to do exactly what it's meant to do. Like when Patrick mentioned, like Woodfield Cottage, you only see primarily Black children. That's basically happening, with the statistics that he mentioned as well. There's just a whole lot of racial disparity. So I think that's what that statement meant by that. Yeah, there are people that want to try to change the system, but we have to go through the training. We have to educate ourselves first in order to make that change. But I don't think that by that statement, it meant to generalize everything.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yes, was that helpful? Okay.
Yeah, that was helpful. And also what you said is that they have to go through that. How do we get to the point where people understand that they have to go through the training and the understanding that we are going through? I'm looking at this little box here of 2 frameworks of, people, two pages here. Okay, so it's very few people in our diversity group at the Center for Spiritual Living, Santa Rosa. Very few people in the world are doing this training, this restorative justice, this, other work here. So I think my point is, how do we get people to understand the need for this so strongly that they earmark the time for it, so strongly that they say, this is the only way that things are going to change is if I do this, if we do this. So,
Well, I think that we just need to have more open conversation. I know that it's a little frustrating. It's not gonna, I feel like for me, it was frustrating because it's not gonna happen overnight. But I think that if we just start by talking to one person, a family member, a friend, and then they talk to more people about that, and I think that it'll spread more awareness, and then we can keep starting doing the work that we want to see the change in the criminal justice system.
Yeah, and I would like to add also, you know, right, Far, you were saying that, you know, in this platform, there's, right now there are 49 people on, and that may not sound like a lot, but what if each one of us spoke to two, and then one of those spoke to two, and right in each one, so it keeps spreading. And the thing that I know is, like, just keep showing up, keep having the conversations. Yeah. Thank you, because I can feel your heart.
Patrick, did you have an add to that?
Yeah, and I think too, just to piggyback on what you said, Eugene, is like, you do have a voice, and I think that's why we focus so much on the youth voice with the work we're doing, because it has to be a part of the puzzle. But everyone has a voice. You can pick up the phone, you can call your local legislator, you can do these things, you can show up and vote, you can do the research before you go and vote. It takes a lot of work to do these things, but there are a lot of things that you can try your best to do, and then promote that along to other folks as well. So at any time throughout the day, you have to remember that you're a change agent. So if you have that time or opportunity to speak up, whether you see something bad happening on the street and you want to videotape it and send that video to your police chief, you can do that. If you want to try to step up and protect somebody when they're going through a challenging time, you can do that, and you can lobby, and you can and advocate in a lot of different ways. So just remember, all your moments throughout the day, you can be an advocate for change.
Thank you. We have Jane, Allison, Seja, and Adine.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
First time I've spoken. I
Welcome.
I appreciate everything that has just been said, and I think that's very important, the most important. So I'm hesitating to ask my question, but I know that some universities and colleges will, some professors will go into prisons and teach courses. I've seen documentaries on that, and it's been successful, but I also have seen somewhat more recently, they're trying hard to stop that. And I don't know if this is part of the restorative justice, that if you can get people in there teaching classes, it would be helpful.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, the Barred Prison Initiative is the example here in New York State, and it has great outcomes, as you can see in their data that they do provide, the reduced recidivism rates that come with graduates from their program, and they are both in women's and men's prisons throughout New York State. I'm not sure what other states are on that level of developing programs like the Barred Prison Initiative. But in New York, that might be the documentary that you watch. There's a really great one. I believe it's on Netflix. And that shows a really great alternative. So I'm sure, at times it can be tough to staff those programs. But as far as I know, that's a growing program and initiative here in New York State.
One of the things that has been shown is how integral or how important education is to deterrence to incarceration, right? That the commonality that many but that it has been found that people have once they're incarcerated is they do not have that level of education that would have allowed them, right, to make different choices. Now, that's not always true, but there have been a lot of studies about that. And so one of the things that I was very dismayed to learn about was when they really removed a lot of that, the right to earn a degree while you're incarcerated, got taken away from these incarcerated individuals, which is really unconscionable to me. But Jane, if you are you a professor? Are you someone who wants to do some training with incarcerated people? Because I encourage you to find out how to do that wherever you are.
I was a professor, but I don't have, like you were talking about, somebody asked about the skills you need to work with Black incarcerated people, and how white people need to read books and be at book clubs. I have not done that, and I am not in a position. Well, and you mentioned calling your local congressman. I mean, I watched a great program on 60 Minutes. They did a kind of a special, I don't know if you call it an experiment. I think it was in Cook County, and they put a certain number of prison inmates in a special place, a special part of the prison, separate from the others. They vetted them somewhat, and they told the guards, they trained them, but they only trained them and had to say, you need to do just one thing. You have to act like you care about the inmates. And that was a wonderful program on 60 Minutes, and it really helped a great deal. They had the lifers come in and work with the young men in there. And I mean, some of them didn't even know words, and they taught them, they used dictionaries and taught them words. And once they learned words, they didn't have to just strike out and fight. They could talk. They had something to say and say it right. And they had group therapy sessions, and that was a wonderful experimental program, and it worked very well.
Well, I'm just going to reiterate what Patrick and Eugene are saying, right? That you have tremendous agency. As a former professor, you have tremendous agency, right? Those letters behind your name actually resonate in some communities. And for you to, collaborate with maybe some other former professors and figure out how to create a program that makes a difference, because you would be surprised. There's a lot that you don't need to know. All right. Sometimes you just need to take action and then ask, and then people will tell you what you need to know. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I'm in Michigan, by the way.
Yeah. Well, Michigan needs you, right? Yes. Thank you very much.
We have Allison, Seja, then Adine.
Okay. I guess my question is a little bit different. I think you keep talking about do this and do that. One of the things I've realized, I mean, I've done a certain amount of stuff, but is I'm not really a leader, and I'm not really a capital A activist. As I put it, I'm not going to be, I don't have the nature that would work for me to be on the front lines of things. But as I put it, I'd be happy to work on the, join with the ladies auxiliary, so to speak, to bake cupcakes, to what, if somebody can give me simple things to do and say, do this, and I'll do it. But most of the time it's like, well, let's go and have all these education sessions and we'll talk about how horrible things are. And I say, fine, I know things are horrible. I've been hearing about this since I was 3. But I'd like to actually have something I can put in my hands and do. And I guess that's what I would be asking. For those of us who don't have an ability to organize ourselves into doing all sorts of bold and stuff, if it's just a matter of, like, as I say, like when I found out about 2 Black Lives Matter things in the past year since the pandemic started, and I showed up at both of them, I figured, well, showing up is something. But, when it's about, let's do something, but it's all about, all these theory stuff, that goes over my head.
Really, really
So
good. Yeah, go ahead, Ayanna.
Oh, I thought it was interesting that you said, or like it stuck out to me when you said that, yeah, we know that things are horrible, but what else should we do? And I thought it was a perfect segue to like talk about my book, A New Hope for Justice. So in my book, like, yeah, I talk about certain issues. I talk about like particular issues, like stuff that's going on in jail, juvenile justice. But I also talk about like different solutions on how like ordinary people like you and me can like make a difference in there. So I would suggest like um ordering a copy off of Amazon. And you can also do social media things, spread awareness like that. Find organizations, local organizations that you find you're passionate about, and you can make a difference that way as well. You don't have to do anything crazy that you don't want to do. Just do something that feels comfortable to you.
Ayanna, hold up the book, please. Hold your book up to
Oh,
the
yeah.
screen, please. Just one more time. Just hold it up. There we go. All right, thank
A
you.
New Hope for Justice.
Yes.
On Amazon. And yeah, I just wanted to mention too, Allison, it doesn't always take being that person to go out and be on the front line or speaking up and doing, these intensive and sometimes pressure putting situations. Ayanna and I are actually behind the scenes type of people. We talk about this a lot, and that we're trying to push ourselves to be out there more and do more socializing and networking. But we like to do things like Ayanna wrote a book, and I love to do data research, analysis, and collection. So the things that we do are very much so behind the scenes, but we know that this is a part of the puzzle, right? We have to speak up, we have to say stuff, we have to stand up and work with each other to do the work together. So it's a part of the puzzle, but there's still a lot that you can do behind the scenes.
Right.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say, because this is something we've been discussing in our PU congregation, is it's even what that is too abstract for me. I mean, I don't do social media, period. And almost everybody I talk to would agree with all these wonderful things. But if somebody says, okay, I want you to be at this table from 6 to 9, I can do that. If someone says, promote this idea, I'm lost. Some of us are just really not the kind of people who can put all this stuff together in terms of what to do.
So as you were speaking about that, Allison, before, the thing that popped up into my mind was, first thing, because I love music, right? And so there's this lead singer who sounds great, but the music isn't as good without the background singer, right? But the one thing that I want to say to you is that just like you did with the two Black Lives Matter events, you show up somewhere and go, put me to work. How can I serve?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I know I don't want to go lead. I just, if I don't know how to do something, then show me how to do it. And then I am here from 6 to 9, from whatever it is. The point is to show up. Yeah. Thank you for your heart. We have Seja, Adine, and then Carol.
Oh, hi.
Oh, and then Julie.
I'm making progress. I think I have 2 friends here that weren't before, so I guess that's progress according to the standard just mentioned. And I also am hoping that Lane or you can speak to a group that I belong to and perhaps do a similar thing for that group in a Zoom meeting or something on Saturdays. The question I have is, are there books that could be recommended, and I only mean like 1 or 2, of writings by probably younger people or adults remembering their youth, that have some very heartfelt, poignant stories about their encounters in their lives that have been unjust. And because what I'm imagining is doing some kind of session where we would take short stories and just each person would take a turn reading a different short story aloud to the group. Because I think for myself, being Caucasian, that has landed well with me, that hearing those words in my heart, in my gut, that changes me. And I really feel like I can advocate and I can be an activist and stand on a corner. But if I don't change my heart and my gut, and nothing else happens. So I just wondered if there were some books you might recommend that have stories written by prisoners or anybody who has something they really wish the world could hear.
Again, another perfect segue. Like for me, like when I wrote A New Hope for Justice, I got to interview people that were in the incarceration system or had like their own contact with it. So I also like included like little anecdotes about what they went through in there. So that's like a little cool thing as well. So it's not only just talking about the problems within the criminal justice system, it's also talking about real experiences within it and also solutions.
Thank you.
No problem.
Excuse me, I know we are going to Dean Saja. I just put the name of a podcast in the chat for you. What Chance is a podcast with Carolyn Elias, and she talks with people who have been or are incarcerated. And someone else said Weed Works by Amanda Gorman.
Thank you.
Getting things done.
Mail out the chat later. That would be a good idea.
Yes. There are books, and you and I will work on that. Don't worry.
All right. Thank you.
Dean.
Thank you. I'm listening to this discussion, and I really think we're talking about two very powerful demands. One demand is to encourage whites, as someone said, to change the lens through which they view the world. But I'm afraid, this I'm just speaking for myself, I'm afraid that most whites are quite comfortable and quite satisfied to go along with their lives, realize that there's some real bad injustices going on, but can find reasons for not doing much about it. Their comfort level is not upset by horrific things happening to people of color. And that's what we call a racist system. The other powerful demand is that we need to protect and save. I think of the organization Save the Children. We need to save and protect minority children from a system that is trying to destroy them. This is part of the plan. This is not an accident. I say that over and over again. It is not an accident that predominantly Black schools are habitually underfunded. This is a plan. They don't want them going to Wall Street. They want them going to prison. Because once they're there, then you can look down on them for being in prison, after you've made people live in conditions which lead them to that. So we have to really be clear-eyed about why this continues to happen. It continues to happen because our leaders want it to happen. Now, one thing we can do for those who are unsure of what they can do, volunteer in the schools. Good volunteers create such wonderful one-to-one emotional connections with students. And it doesn't matter if this is a Black child and you're a white adult. I've seen these relationships blossom, and you really can help to save a child if you go in 1 or 2 days a week and become a deep, committed friend. And you don't have to have any more training than just caring.
Good words. Once again, Nadine, thank you so very much. Yeah, getting involved. So then we have Carol, Julie, and then Joe.
Thank you. All the things I was thinking of, it was Allison, I think. Like we have a anti-racism coalition in our faith community, and we're building in our, I don't know where you are, but we're building in our city. We have a rich civil rights history. And, you know, we need to raise $2 million. Well, not everybody can write grants, but some people can do the research from home on their computer. And some of us walk the neighborhood for the Black Community Focus Fund and interview people, like get stories of people. Oh, what else was I going to say? Oh, buddy readers. We have in our public school buddy readers. We go in and work with young kids a couple days a week on reading and form really good relationships. So you don't have to be out and loud if you don't want to be. But see if you can find a group in your community. And I mean, right now our group meets on Zoom, but we all have our little things to do behind the scenes. So there definitely are things you can find.
Thank you, Carol. Okay. We go with Julie, and then we're going to make my brother Joe the last question.
Allison, you provoked a lot of response. I wanted to tell you that 40 years ago or so, when I began to want to make a contribution and had no idea how to do it, I joined, or I should say, I got in touch with groups that did anti-racist work, and I got in touch with groups that were Black-led, and I did things like do the sign-in sheets at events. And I think that there are a whole range of behind-the-scenes things that you can bring some energy to that are so essential to keeping these groups going. And I now do much more complicated things, but you don't have to. You can just offer your time and your energy to do the simplest kinds of work. And if you ask what needs doing, someone will tell you.
Yep. Surely. Okay. And then we have, for our last question, Brother Joe.
Thanks, Eugene. I just wanted to add a comment. It's very similar to what we just heard from Julie. And it's in response, it's associated with what Patrick talked about when he encouraged us all to read and to do research and get the fundamentals of anti-racism work. Do that work and be prepared, educate yourself before perhaps getting involved in work. And the reason why I want to add this comment, one thing I learned when I joined the NAACP chapter locally was that I was glad that I had done some of that work and read some books and participated in some workshops, because I learned that when white folks are thrown into working in proximity with people that don't look like them, if you don't do that background fundamental work, it's very likely that you're going to inadvertently cause harm by things that are going to come out of your mouth, because you haven't done the work to understand it's not your fault, but you're going to say some stupid stuff that inadvertently is going to really interfere with your ability to build relationships with that new community. And it's going to make you damn uncomfortable doing that work, doing the reading. There's nothing easy about it, but you may totally defeat the whole idea of becoming an activist or just doing something to be a white ally if you're not ready to be in community with people that don't come from that don't look like you and don't understand your culture and background. You can really do some damage, and that's my comment.
Thanks, Joe. Well, you know what? Serena and Miss Ruthie, I just sent you a chat saying that Joe would be the last question. but we have a little bit more time, so let's make yours the last question.
This is Serena. I have often talked about a summer that I spent through Michigan State University Extension teaching a youth gardening program at our local juvenile detention center, which is a euphemism because it's a child prison. That's what it is. I am not a teacher. I have a degree in business, but I volunteered to do this program. It was one of the most incredible experiences of my life. It was volunteer, it was not paid. I had 4 classrooms, and the first class, which was of the younger children, they gave me a standing ovation after every class that I was there. They got up and cheered. The classroom that I had was of the girls. I knew all of their names on my second visit. And one of the girls had said to me that it was my second time there and I knew all of their names, and she had been there for 2 months and not one staff member knew her name. A little
Wow.
boy that was in the younger class, when he saw me, he would jump up and down, and he was explaining to one of the new kids, he said, "You'll love this class. She's my favorite teacher. She's my favorite teacher of all time." I am not a teacher. I'm just a lady that went into this program, and it was absolutely incredible. And yes, it was shocking. I'm a white woman, and predominantly white community. The children were 70% were African American, and you hear those statistics and you actually see it in person. It was really shocking to me. There were only 3 kids that I could clearly see that had behavioral problems. But I loved that class, and I have run into a few of my students since, and they still call me Miss Pittman. And I don't have time to go on about it, but it was just a wonderful experience. And yes, you can make a difference if you take the time.
Yes. Thank you so very much, Serena. So all of we've been hearing just in the last few minutes of ways that we can get involved. Instead of saying suit up and show up, show up and ask, how can I serve? How can I serve? Lane?
So yeah, thank you for everyone. Thank you for your questions and your interaction. I'd like to give some last words, opportunities to our speakers this afternoon, Patrick Schelle and Ayanna Armstrong. What would you like us to take away from this presentation today? And yes, please, we have about 3 minutes.
Quickly, I wanted to say how to keep the hope alive. Like when I went to the Youth Bureau with Patrick a couple weeks ago, one of the youth asked me, like, they said, "Yeah, we know that you wrote a book, but tell us about you." And I thought that was a really great question, because I feel like a lot of people just assume, or they just associate me with the book, but I'm more than just this author. Like, I have more to me. And I shared with them that I'm not perfect, and that, I was diagnosed with depression a few months ago, and it's been rough. But how I personally kept the hope alive, even in my darkest moment, is just keeping this vision and doing more things like this, speaking out, having a voice, because I know what it feels like to feel like I don't have a voice. And I know that my purpose is to keep helping people and just to leave a positive impact on those that I meet along the way. So I hope that you guys do the work that you need to do in order to make a difference, however way that you see fit, whether it's volunteering, going to organizations, joining a couple chapters like the NAACP, ADDIC. There's a whole bunch of ways for you guys to make a difference.
Thank you. Patrick.
I mean, that's just to piggyback on that. It's a call to action. Like we mentioned a lot of things just now that you can do something, find something that really drives your passion, something that you are, passionate about and excited about, latch on to that thing and stay committed to it. There's a lot you can do, like we mentioned, whether it's, something small or engaging with the community in a certain way, or other larger macro level efforts as well. So don't give up and keep doing your practices and keep growing. We can
Thank you
share
so
our,
much.
our email in the chat. And then also I have like resources that I can share with everyone as well. And Lane, if you would like me to just put those up for the last few minutes. So
Yes, I
jot
would.
down.
I would. I see that your email is in the chat, ATI Coalition 914@gmail.com. And then if you can just put all of these into the chat, Patrick, that would be great. So just cut and paste them.
For sure, for sure.
Please do join us next week when our guest will be Lieutenant Melissa McFadden. Lieutenant McFadden has been a member of the Columbus, Ohio Police Department for over 20 years. She is an African-American high-ranking police officer and has written a memoir entitled Walking the Thin Black Line, Confronting Racism in the Columbus Division of Police. And she'll be here to share her story with us. Also, I am part of a team of trainers at an upcoming anti-racism workshop. If you are interested, please contact me or go to the link that I'm going to place in the chat. It's Rethinking Racism for Racial and Social Justice. It's November 13th and 14th. And as Patrick and my goodness, Sandy mentioned, the Undoing Racism workshop is something to Google. Also, the groundwater training and getting to the root. So if you're serious about finding an anti-racism training to participate in, that link is there in that chat, Rethinking Racism for Racial and Social Justice, and there are others. Eugene.
We also want to continue to encourage you, right, to have conversations with folks who are not like you, right? Then also I want to thank you again, Patrick Schelle of Alternative to Incarceration Coalition 914, and to the Miss Ayanna Armstrong, the beautiful author of A New Hope for Injustice. I also want to continue to thank our supporters. We appreciate your donations as well as your suggestions for speakers and topics you'd like for us to feature. And now, if you're interested in bringing racial justice conversations to your organization or congregation or community, please let us know. We would like to partner with you to create loving, inclusive, and courageous conversations like this one here. You can always reach out to us at our website, which is racetalkrevolution.com. And you can also email Lane and myself at info@racetalkrevolution.com. Again, another beautifully powerful episode of Race Talk Revolution. I personally want to say, and I think I can speak for Lane as well, that if it weren't for you, let me put it a different way. If it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be here. Thank you so very much.
Patrick, I see you now putting the resources in the chat. Okay, great. There are people who want us to stay live until all those are up there, and we certainly will do. If you're someone who wants to save the chat, I think that you can go to all the way into the chat on the right-hand side. There are 3 dots at the bottom. It says more. You click that, and then the first line will say save chat, and you'll be able to save that chat to your own device. Okay? That way you'll have everything that was in here. Also, Patrick, you recommended a book, who was the gentleman, Broward?
Yeah, the Cleve Browder story, that's the life and death in Rikers Island.
Yeah, so that's a recommendation for who was asking, Seja. Okay, very good. All right, folks, we'll stay up so that you can copy whatever you want in the chat, but we are officially done for the day. Thank you, Patrick Schelle and Ayanna Armstrong. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise. Thank you for doing the work. We need you. Please come back anytime. Thank you for our first timers today. We are so happy to see you. Please don't be strangers. All right, we're here every Wednesday.
Thank you.
Be a friend, tell a friend.
Thank you for having us.
Bye-bye, everybody.